Much mystery surrounds the famous English writer William Shakespeare. With little evidence surviving from the times, scholars have had to piece together his life like a jigsaw puzzle. From crazy facts of the universe to illiteracy, stay tuned to find out if Shakespeare was really even Shakespeare. Number 10. Coat of arms. In the 16th century, it was considered respectable to have a coat of arms. While they had no practical purpose, they were more for show, a symbol of status. But getting one wasn't easy. People would have to make an application to the College of Arms with supporters, and they had to prove that the family was worthy of it. Oh, and they had to have money. A lot of money. The coat of arms were considerably expensive, and for many it would have been a lot more than a year's salary. As a result, they served as excellent status symbols, and it's perhaps not surprising that they were highly sought after. William's father, John, applied for a coat of arms from the College of Heralds, but unfortunate changes in his financial situation prevented him from obtaining it. Thankfully, William later received the claim on his father's behalf and was successful in obtaining a family coat. It's always handy to have a successful son. Number 9. Birthday confusion. As with a lot of things about Shakespeare, scholars are not 100% sure of his exact date of birth. His baptism is recorded in the register of the Holy Trinity Parish Church in Stratford as taking place on the 26th of April, 1564. It was tradition during the 16th century to have a christening as soon as possible after birth. This has led some scholars to set his birthday as 3 days earlier, on April the 23rd, which is also St. George's Day in England. The claim of this date can be traced back to the 18th century. However, no hard evidence exists. Which makes it even more difficult is that for most of the 16th century, England still used the Julian calendar. This was not changed until October 1582 when Pope Gregory XIII introduced the Gregorian calendar, which had a 0.002% correction in the length of the year. It's likely that we'll never know the exact date, but it's just one more mystery to add to several others surrounding Shakespeare's life. Number 8. Shakespeare, America, and Starlings. Starlings are one of the many birds referenced throughout Shakespeare's plays, but one species has been causing serious issues in America: the European starling. In 1890, German immigrant Eugene Schieffelin, who's a big fan of Shakespeare's works and who, for unknown reasons, thought it would be a good idea to populate North America with as many of Shakespeare's birds as possible. Well, one day Eugene did exactly that, and he released 60 starlings into Central Park in New York City. The rest, as they say, is history. These birds were very good at reproducing, and now there are estimated to be about 200 million European starlings in North America. Eugene was part of the American Acclimatization Society, who sought to introduce as many Old World species of animals and plants to the New World. But what's the issue? Well, not only did they introduce an invasive species, one that now dominates the skyline, but they are now causing other issues. They are having an impact on the agricultural industry. On average, European starlings cause up to $1 billion worth of damage. They're even known to have an influence on the dairy industry. The more the starlings eat the grains, the less grain is available for the cows to eat, which in turn means they produce less milk. And perhaps the most frightening thing is their impact on flights and their capacity to endanger human lives. In 1960, a flock of birds flew into the engine of a flight departing from Boston Airport. What would Shakespeare think of all this? Well, we'll never know, but it certainly is interesting. Number 7. Illiteracy. Although we don't know much about Shakespeare, scholars believe most of his family would have been illiterate. Now, this is not uncommon given the time period, and taking into consideration his apparent humble origins, it's not surprising that they were illiterate. The general belief is that his parents were illiterate, as his father signed his name on documents with just a mark. But it's also believed that his wife and children may also have been illiterate. Even though illiteracy was not uncommon in the time, it is surprising that one of the greatest English writers in history came from an illiterate family. Who taught him how to read and write? That's a question that continues to puzzle scholars and will fuel the theories that he was not the true author of the works attributed to him. Number 6. The missing years. Although scholars don't know much about Shakespeare's life, they've been able to piece together little bits from various sources like legal documents, birth records, and later writings. From what they've been able to gather, it has become apparent that there are some missing years where no information about his life survives. The two main time periods where records seem to disappear completely is between 1579 and 1582, and then again between 1585 and 1592. For the latter, they don't know what he did between the recorded birth of his twins' baptism in 1585 and when the playwright Robert Greene referred to him as an upstart crow in a pamphlet. Scholars have speculated about what he did though, and theories range from becoming a schoolteacher, a butcher, a lawyer's clerk, that he traveled across Europe, or maybe even that he joined a passing acting troupe. The one thing that is clear though is that he'd already made a name for himself by the time Robert called him that upstart crow. Number 5. Translated into Klingon. Like many great pieces of literature, Shakespeare's work has been translated into many different languages, 80 to be exact. There is nothing surprising about this given the popularity of his works, but what is interesting is that some of his works have been translated into Klingon. While some of you may be very familiar with Klingon, some of you just might be scratching your head. Well, Klingon is a constructed language that was created for the Star Trek universe. The language is used in the television series by a species known as the Klingons. Thanks to the popularity of the TV show and the whole Star Trek universe, Klingon has crept into reality. Since its creation, a few people have gone as far as to become fluent in the language, and in August of 2016, a company in the UK began offering Klingon lessons. Yes, that's right, you too can become fluent in Klingon. At least you won't need to read the subtitles anymore. I think it's safe to say that Shakespeare would never have thought his works would end up to one day be read and spoken in a language that was made up for an alien race. Number 4. The Moons of Uranus. Keeping in with the theme of space, Shakespeare has made it out to space in another way as well. Uranus, the 7th planet of the solar system, has 27 known moons. These were all named after characters from works by Alexander Poe and William Shakespeare. Some of the names that derive from Shakespeare's plays are Oberon and Puck from A Midsummer Night's Dream, Miranda, Caliban, Prospero, and more from The Tempest, Cordelia from King Lear, Ophelia from Hamlet, Bianca from The Taming of the Shrew, Juliet from Romeo and Juliet, Rosalind from As You Like It, Margaret from Much Ado About Nothing, and Cupid from Timon of Athens. That's just a few of the moons that were named after characters from Shakespeare's books. Number 3. Different variations of spelling. Most people have one way to spell their names, and they normally stick to that version. Others might have multiple versions for the spelling of their names, especially when taking into consideration foreign spellings. But most of these would still likely just use one version legally. Shakespeare was different. From the very little amount of records we have, 6 surviving original signatures have been identified. Found on legal documents, the 6 signatures are located across 4 different legal documents, and each spelling is slightly different. They range from WILLMSHAKP, WMSHAKSPE, and William SHAKSPERE. If we accept that each one was written by Shakespeare himself, that means he's used 6 different spellings for his name, sometimes 2 different versions on the same document. But a little bit of research into Shakespeare's time will indicate that this was not uncommon during the 16th century. Some of these variations served as abbreviations, a custom that's found in other literary and legal documents. To make matters even more complicated, many other variations were written in the years since his death. Not only did some use the variations used by Shakespeare, but others likely adopted different spellings in accordance to the fashion of spelling in the day. And all this just in English. He would have acquired many more names when he was referred to in foreign languages. Do you know how many variations of the spelling of your name there are? Number 2. Multiple authors for his works. As we've already mentioned, not much is known about William Shakespeare. We know a lot about his works, but a lot less about the real person. It is perhaps not surprising then that there have been lively debates about the authorship of his work. To name just a few, Americans Joseph C. Hart and Delia Bacon both argued that the plays were written by several different authors, and others have suggested that authors like Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, Sir Francis Bacon, playwright Christopher Marlowe, and many more. The evidence for these claims ranges from hidden codes in the text to similarities in writing styles. Nevertheless, most academics believe that the works are Shakespeare's and Shakespeare's alone. Regardless of this fact, the topic has been widely debated for nearly 200 years now, and it doesn't look like it'll be dying down anytime soon. Number 1. King James and the King James Bible. Shakespeare was writing during the reigns of 2 English monarchs, Queen Elizabeth and King James I of England. Like any good performer, Shakespeare knew how to entertain his audience. This is evident in the fact that his acting company was called the Chamberlain's Men during Elizabeth's reign and the King's Men during James's reign. Some might even say that the patronage of king was very important to Shakespeare, and many believe that he aimed to flatter and please the king with his play Macbeth. This relationship between King James and Shakespeare has led some to believe that Shakespeare might even have had a hand in the creation of the King James Version of the Bible. In particular, the Jacobean conspiracy theorists believe there to be cryptic clues in the text that suggest he had a hand in translating or writing Psalm 46. It is believed Shakespeare would have been 46 when the King James Bible was published, and Shakespearean scholars believe that the 46th word from the beginning is shake, while the 46th word from the end is spear. Coincidence? Well, most believe it to be nothing more than that. Nevertheless, it makes a good story, and it only adds to the mystery surrounding William Shakespeare. What do you think about the King James Bible theory? Do you think he wrote it? What is your favorite work from Shakespeare? We'd love to hear from you in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more interesting topics. I bid you a fond adieu.